Marco.
Sean.
It's time to go back to the future.
Back to the Future. As a kid of the 80s, I really loved that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you're much younger than me, so.
Did you like the concept of the movie or the car in the movie? Or
I liked everything about it. Oh, yeah. If it comes out on TV, I still watch it. Yeah, there's two movies with that and Top Gun that I would not pass.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I think I'll stick with the one we talked about this morning, which was Young Frankenstein.
Oh, well, that's totally
that paired with Airplane or something. I don't know. What are we talking about?
I don't know. It's in a way.
You and I go off on tangents.
We talk call it a little bit of a Frankenstein because the cybersecurity industry for me it's a little bit of a monster.
Yeah, we do
different things
that.
Put together.
Monster, yeah.
And then definitely the DeLorean because we're gonna maybe go a little bit into the future, but I don't know anything.
So we took the Elizabeth line here to Abbey Normal? Abbey Wood, I think it was.
Abbey Wood.
The direction right. Anyways, enough messing around here. I'm thrilled to have our friends from Forrester. I love working with the Forrester team. Great insights on all things tech and cyber, and always great conversations when they join us. And we have Madeline Van Der Hout back on again. It's good to have you on. And
Paul McKay.
Paul McKay. That's right. I was trying to remember how to pronounce the last name after you said it.
Don't go wrong with that.
I know.
one gets used to it when you have a Scottish name.
Yes.
That's right. Can't mess that up, which I normally do. I usually mess up the names as soon as I think about them. I overthink it. But anyways, thrilled to have you on here. We're obviously, well, not obviously, we're here at Infosecurity Europe in London at the Excel, and lots of great conversations going on this week. And I'm excited to hear what the two of you heard, said, saw, expect to see in a few years now that you've experienced all things Infosecurity Europe this week. Before we do that, though, a few words from each of you, who you are, what you're up to, your role at Forrester, what areas you look after, and Madeline, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so Madeline Van Der Hout. I'm a senior analyst at Forrester, Cybersecurity and Risk. So I cover different domains within the cybersecurity and risk space.
And I think we joked about being nerdy on risk last time.
We did, and all things legislation where other people get bored, but we get enthusiastic. We see possibilities and opportunities.
We see through the boredom into the fun. All right.
And my name is Paul McKay. I'm a VP and Research Director at Forrester, and I'm one of our European Tech Research Directors, so I oversee a whole bunch of people doing broader tech research, and also Madeline and Toby, who do some of the cybersecurity and risk topics myself. I used to be an analyst covering things like cybersecurity services and some of the risk quantification and ratings technologies. So I've had a bit of a back to the future type thing with them as well, meeting some old acquaintances, as they say.
Love it. Yeah, and I had the pleasure of chatting with Tope as well, and so I'd encourage folks to listen to that episode. It was a great, again, another great conversation with the Forrester team.
So I think this is the perfect moment to have this conversation because we are at the third day of a 3 days event that, from what I could see from up here looking down, pretty busy, going around, definitely I think more vendors than last year, maybe
floor
wrong,
is bigger,
but
for sure.
And larger floor, a lot of AI I see on the marketing and banners, but
but not as much in the conversation.
Not as much in the conversation, but that's what happened to us, and so to have someone like you that look into the present and the future. What's your feeling about this event, Madeline? Let's start with you.
Well, looking at the present and the future, I think that there are multiple big events when it comes to cybersecurity in Europe, and they are more and more emerging. And my takeaway actually is, while I've seen great information, great talks, great speeches, met up with an enormous amount of specialists in the industry and vendors, I do believe that they are choosing now where to go to. So a couple of people you would have expected at this event were not here. They were at Cybersecurity Europe and the other way around. So I think in terms of importance, that really shows that we're trying on multiple levels to share information and in multiple places within Europe.
Okay, Paul?
I think what I would reflect on is I agree with Madeline that there are definitely some notable absences in terms of some of the larger enterprise vendors that one might expect to see here. I would also say that some of the exuberance we saw at some of these shows over the last couple of years when money was plentiful has kind of been toned down a lot. So there's not the kind of building size robots or any of the kind of other gimmickry that we see in years
Hanging
gone past.
sharks, yeah.
And I think that reflects a little bit the broader kind of austerity that we see within the cybersecurity community. So as I said at the beginning, I spend a lot of time not just with security leaders but also tech leaders. And that kind of pressure from the business to do more with less is impacting security leaders now. So some of the things that I heard in conversations were really focused on we need to really be effective in how we're spending our money, making sure we are very thoughtful with what we spend our money on. And I'm not sure the cybersecurity industry has really got the memo here, because you still have over 3,500 cybersecurity vendors all chasing after the same small pots of money, when the pressure from the rest of the business is really around consolidation. So if I was kind of looking to the future, I would say you're going to see a lot more interest in security tech that helps CISOs really justify what they're spending their money on in financial terms. It allows the business to understand how that weighs up against other things they could spend their money on. I also have heard a lot about AI from vendors, but also a lot of AI fatigue. You know, we've been through this a couple of times in the industry
Already.
before.
Well, yes.
But I think the broad challenge of the promise of the AI hype is not quite meeting the reality, and I think you see that in the cybersecurity space as well. So I think again CISOs are kind of a little bit tired of hearing that there's gold at the end of the rainbow, or that there's milk and honey on the other side of the Thames and all this other stuff. So I think that you're going to see a focus on practical AI use cases that have that business ROI and return. So those would be my kind of two things kind of going into the future.
Yeah.
Exactly. The conversation that I have with multiple end users actually this week was about them saying, I'm so fatigued of the generative AI washing.
Yeah.
I know that if I don't have a policy in place that my employees will bring their own device, but we still have to debate, especially in security, what are those use cases that I want, that I need, that can actually have effective artificial intelligence of machine learning practices in there. So I think that was also sort of what they were seeking coming here, and seeking to have that conversation. And I fully agree with the consolidation. We're battling day-to-day business. We're trying to create business value, or help our company create business value, while we have to prioritize. And then you have to think of every different domain of security that needs to be in there. And we have to look at the regulatory landscape, which is increasingly becoming difficult, because you need to understand where you need to comply, how we need to comply, and we need to make sure that that's best practice we implement, like the bare minimum we implement, and that it's not about having a compliance check, because then, you know, that should not be the goal whatsoever.
So yesterday, Sean, and you and me were talking about, and we made the reference to the Frankenstein Jr. And the thing is, what you said, Paul, about a lot of people, and Madeline too, that a lot of company now being here. I talked to several CMOs, and yeah, they're looking at this thing as well. Like, and the monster reference for me, from a brand and marketing perspective, is the fact that it's just too much. Cybersecurity right now is everything. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, it could have been enclosed into a conference, and now I feel like you need a specific conference for a certain angle of cybersecurity, even if at the end they need to come together. But you can't go to a conference and then say, well, I can only hit 30% of it. What's the point, right? So this fragmentation is probably good for the industry. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess what I would say has been quite interesting is when I started coming to these events as an analyst 6 or so years ago, this was one of the dominant events in Europe. This was the closest thing you got to the RSA conference in Europe. I think what's happened, which is really healthy, is that there's a lot more competition for the CISOs. They're not all having to get on planes and travel to London. They can actually find all of the insight they need within their local market in places like France, and obviously Cybersecurity Europe is happening in Brussels. So I think you're seeing a fragmentation of this. Now this event obviously has to compete with that, but I think that that's healthy and should be encouraged, because you're getting much more the local perspective as well as the kind of the Europe-wide, or more accurately a more UK-centric perspective at this event in the last year or two. So I think that's a healthy thing.
Yeah.
And I think as well, to me, this event, within cybersecurity, a lot of innovation happens with startups, for instance. These type of events also stimulate larger vendors communicating with smaller startups and seeing how that can support the entire ecosystem. So I think it's actually a good development that it's happening in multiple countries and that it's happening on multiple levels, because not every startup is able to come to London or to come to Brussels or to Lille. We have Insider Forum as well over there. So I think it's good to fuel that ecosystem and to be aware of how to work with that. And in terms of also consolidation, what CISOs are expecting, if we have a look, for instance, at API security, we see a lot of consolidation happening already within the market, but it's driven by, well, first of all, we're approaching API security from the data perspective. Then we're approaching it from the network perspective. Then we're approaching it solely APIs. But CISOs are sometimes also expecting, it's part of my infrastructure, it's part of my network, why isn't it secured? So to me, that was also one of the takeaways from the conference. Yes, we see loads more API vendors, and you can already see movement happening in which direction based on how CISOs perceive where it should be in their security program.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also noted, walking through the hall, a number of API security vendors specifically there. That's what they do. And
APIs have been around forever.
I remember
but
30
now
years
we're
ago,
having the
as a QA
conversation
engineer,
on.
that was my job, was to test the APIs, and if they didn't exist, I knew they were going to come at some point, so I had to test the functions that would eventually be exposed as an API.
Yep.
Exactly.
I'm wondering, this is something that crosses my mind quite often, because there's so much technology, right? So many parts of an InfoSec program, and so many technologies to help with those things. And this is another conversation we've had there this week around making good decisions on where and how to invest. And at a tech show, you look at the tech, but for me, it's much more than that. It's how do we staff our team properly? How do we leverage tech to enable them? How do we build our programs that support solid foundational decision making? Tapping into the regulations where we need to, but not just being sold a bill of goods from a provider because we now told we have a gap in our program. So I don't know, what do you see in terms of how the industry is progressing in terms of maybe an abstraction above all the tech to really have a good foundation regardless of decision?
I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, which is, I don't think it is really dealing with that abstraction particularly well. I still see people chasing after, in some cases, quite specific technical problems. And when I'm speaking to the tech leaders about security, they need to understand, because I think generally CIOs and IT leaders are much more along the journey of having a seat at the table, being a business executive that happens to run and operate a technology function. They need to see the business value that's going to be driven by that, and I don't see the awareness of the business value solving said technical challenge has. You still see a lot of vendors kind of saying, well, this is terrible because lists all the technical reasons and reasons why the sky will fall in if this kind of stuff happens. And you see sometimes people flinging out, especially in the last couple of months, well, NIS 2 is coming in the EU, and if the management team don't buy this insert very niche product category, they will get fired, and that's just not reality. And I don't actually think the industry really is particularly mature at that, not when I compare it to the broader tech industry that the rest of my wider team covers.
Well, and to add, I think within security we're still very comfortable talking about technology. And every time something happens and we see emerging trends, emerging technology, we start talking about technology solutions. So we are talking about prioritization, staffing. We have 4 million jobs that we cannot fill because we do not have the people. Oh no, wait, generative AI, it will solve it all. And then we have alert fatigue. No, yeah, you know what? We're gonna optimize everything. But there's one conversation that we're not having. And that's the actual conversation that I had hoped to have here. We did in a session, but not as much as I would have hoped to. And that is actually about, so how do we address this? How do we address skill shortage? What are we going to do as an industry? How can we come together on that and then step away from the technology conversation? One of the other things is cybersecurity burnout. People are moving away from this industry because there are significant levels of stress, they're fatigued, and we're not having a conversation on mental health, but we're having a conversation on, well, what technical solution can help us? And that's actually something that I would love to have more conversations on these type of events, because we're bringing technology leaders, security practitioners together. We're humans.
That's absolutely spot on, Madeline. I think one of the things I see with a lot of my CISO clients, I speak to them at the beginning of their relationship with Forrester. So tell me they can't hire any staff, and then you get I'll use two Dutch expressions that don't particularly translate well into English, but I think they're apt.
They're funny.
When you go through the job requirements and what they're asking for versus what they think they're prepared to pay, they're looking for either the 5-legged sheep or the purple squirrel, depending on what.
Can you say that in Dutch, please?
Het schaap met de 5 poten. So it has the Dutch G, schaap met de 5 poten, yes. So, which is actually an old expression, because I cannot imagine that a sheep with 5 legs can run very fast or is very efficient. But apparently it's our expression to say that you're looking for the unicorn is the British. We would say the unicorn candidate in English. I also like the purple squirrel.
Yeah, so these are expressions that I've learned over the years from Dutch clients. But I think they highlight very succinctly what you see in the industry. You see people asking for CISOs that have experience of operating specific technology stacks and configuring and deploying them and all this sort of stuff. And you sort of think, a CISO is supposed to be an executive accountable for a security function and managing that up to board level if you're really hiring for a true CISO. So things like that are irrelevant. You also see kind of the other way around, where people are struggling to enter the industry because people are being asked to have 3, 4, 5 years experience plus all the certifications plus experience in technologies. I think probably one of my favorite ones was when somebody asked for 10 years experience in implementing a technology that had only existed for 6. I've seen things like that in the past before.
You still see it. I actually saw, like 2-3 weeks ago, I saw one like that. And it's just crazy. And also, one of the things we saw in our research is that one of the departments that are security and technology departments within organizations are working the least with is HR. How is this possible? Because then you get these instances where we need a job profile, but we do not communicate or collaborate enough to have a correct profile in place.
Yeah, that really tends to bite companies in the backside when they get a role they're hiring for mapped to a HR grade, which usually is benchmarked against a generic IT role, and then that drives the salary problem. So sometimes when you get down to it, you kind of say, well, you need to have the conversation, have the battle with HR to try and get the right salary benchmarks done so that you can actually compete in the market. You're never going to be able to compete with, sort of top vendors that can pay top dollar for top talent, but you need to at least be competitive within the industry you're recruiting in, and not just give me a business analyst salary scale when you're looking for a forensic incident response specialist, as an example.
Well,
Exactly.
the purple squirrel or the sheep with 5 legs.
Which one are you?
I don't know. I'm thinking many others, so I could get creative. But the point is the
Must have
same
been Italian
thing.
equipment.
I don't know. I'm thinking in Italian, but it doesn't come in my mind. But I know I see the point, which is I think that the reason for that is because you're kind of scrambling. I think, and you don't have an understanding of what's happening. Maybe because it's still a young industry, so young that you're asking for more experience. What the product is. And you're hoping for this mythological figure that is going to solve all your problem. So maybe it's a lack of strategy, lack of looking at what we really have. Let's play this hand with the card that we've been dealt.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to people perceiving that they're so stressed and busy they don't have the time to train or grow up anyone, so they're kind of looking for a ready-made candidate that exists in the market who just happens to not mind taking a 50% salary cut. If you look into public sector hiring, in many cases that is not an far from the truth figure.
And also having a conversation on certification. So sometimes the goal is to have the certificate because then you're trusted to have the knowledge. So I'm also having sometimes conversations where people ask me, and it depends on countries, but people ask me, so I saw in your LinkedIn that there is no certification. Are you certified? Etc., etc. And then to me it should be about, do you have the knowledge? And if there is not you don't have a certificate zero trust approach, how can we hire younger people into the industry because they just graduated, they want to learn, they want to have career paths. They don't have those certifications yet. Or it's not on LinkedIn, and then it should also be fine, right?
Well, that's all become distributed and dispersed as well, like specialized this cert, specialized that cert.
And I don't think you want to. I think one of the challenges with that is that if you're saying people have to have certifications to get into the industry, you're essentially erecting barriers where only those who can afford to pay hundreds of pounds or send themselves on courses, sometimes costing thousands, can get into the industry. That's creating a bit of a class divide where people that don't have that resources when they come out of university can't actually enter the industry if you're kind of erecting these firewalls in the way.
Yeah. So I was fortunate to be in the industry. I got my CISSP 20-something years ago. And I did it for 2 reasons. One, to learn, because it was a very efficient way to get a nice, strong base of here are all the categories of things that I need to understand to be successful in my role. And then I was a product manager building products. So I needed it. And then the second piece was to get credibility with the customers I was speaking with. I know we're kind of on time, but I'm going to ask one more question here.
One more question.
One more question. Yes, that's my trait. In terms of the maturity of the business, we talked the industry. We're not quite where we need to be in terms of how separating ourselves from technology. So I'm going to swing to the far end of this. It's something I ask on my show quite a bit, which is we see other parts of the business. We can call it transformation. We can call it heavy investment to get the best outcome for a particular function. We see it in marketing, right? A ton of money invested in marketing platforms and technologies and processes and programs with measurement and MBOs and all kinds of stuff tied to all that. And the company can see it's driven by data. I guess it's my point that I'm trying to make. Data-driven business outcomes, right? We make an investment. I'm not convinced that all the stuff in marketing is the accurate way to do it. But anyway, I believe that security has a ton of knowledge and a ton of data to really drive innovative, tech-driven business in a safe way. And I think we're being dragged along as opposed to using the knowledge and data we have to create a better business. So my question to you, do you see an opportunity there? Do you see we'll ever arrive at a point where security is driving the business? Dun, dun, dun,
And this is it.
I will
Goodbye.
I will venture a response here. So I guess as I agree with your point of view here that the data is there, the knowledge is there. But one of the ways in which I'll illustrate this is that one of the more progressive CISOs that I worked with, who actually eventually evolved his role into becoming a CTO of a very large organization, told me one of the things he always did when he took on a new role was to go and spend a week with a salesman or just whatever, just really understanding the business. In enterprise architecture, we would talk about the value chains. How do we drive revenue? What are the ways in which the business makes money, and how do you secure those? That kind of business understanding, that industry knowledge, I think there's the opportunity to get that. There are promising technologies and methodologies and things like cyber risk quantification that I think are going to get us there on the journey. So I'm going to be optimistic and end on the note that I think we will get there. I think it will happen. We saw the same evolution from IT basement for the CIO function, and now I would say that the majority of CIOs I work with are very progressive and really do understand that their role is to use technology to help drive the business and execute on its strategy. I think security, if we get the relationship right with technology and we understand the ways in which the business makes money and how we secure those so people are doing things in the right way, and we're helping them to do their jobs, not getting in the way and providing roadblocks, I think we could get there. But
I'm actually going to take it up a notch. I know we're at a business conference, I know, but is security really only a business problem? No, it's not. We're all consumers. We're all having a private life. We have a business life. On my phone, I have my private data. I also have my teams from my work. So that's the most valuable thing I have in terms of data. So taking it up a notch, it's not just a me and organization problem, it's also a civilian problem. So why not live with the understanding that we as a consumer, as a civilian, also have a responsibility, but also have power, so we can vote on parties that include digitization and security in their programs. And I think that's actually a way we should approach it. We should also look at how to educate civilians and how to educate organizations, and we can vote and we can have power in that sense. So why not approach it a bit on a more meso level?
I agree. that's what I.
It's very profound.
If I can have my Back to the Future moment, or then like maybe progressing into Ford, Ferrari, and Rush, then
My show is technology and society. So I think we have
I'm preaching
wrong.
to the
To the choir,
yeah, to the choir.
I think we all agree with this. If you don't start with the base of education, you just don't have everything else. And my lesson from this conversation and what I
Don't let me ask a last question.
I'm not going to ask. Yeah, well, that's for sure, because we keep going. But we talked more in this conversation about the human element, which I love, than the tech.
Exactly.
Or at least we agree that we need to drive with the human element. Either is education, is mental health, it's burnout,
Exactly.
is using the resources that you have, the human resources that you have in a better way. And as Sean, as you said, maybe we do have a lot of stuff, and we don't need another blinking light tomorrow that is going to distract us from what we could do with what we have.
And you know what? One of our predictions for this year actually is that in 90% of all data breaches, there is a human element. So why not talk about the humans?
Let's do
There
it.
we go. If
We just
only I
did.
was human.
Yeah.
fully overseen.
I'm predicting
I'm a
in 2
purple
years
squirrel.
from now we'll talk about
You're a
aliens.
five-legged sheep. I'm a purple squirrel.
I think
So neither of us are human.
I think
Sorry.
alien solution will be on the
If they have feelings, aliens still qualify for me as humans.
we
So,
may
you
need an
know.
overlord to tell us.
I can see a market there. Alien cyber XDR detection response as a service.
Alien driven.
Fight
Alien driven.
fight aliens with better aliens.
Yeah.
There you go.
Adversarial aliens.
Marco, as the creative director, you have the fun task of photoshopping our photo that we're going to take after this.
Oh God!
Turn
no.
us into
Into
a five-legged sheep and a purple squirrel.
I'll ask ChatGPT.
There you go. Perfect.
All right, so great to have you guys.
I
This
know.
was a fantastic
Madeline and Paul,
conversation.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you for
much for
having us.
having
We
us.
tried to drag Tope in. He was too shy or too busy, one of the two, or both. Or he just didn't care about us.
Well,
But,
I think we got a lot.
anyway, we'll have another chat with him. I really enjoyed connecting with him. So
Well, I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. If you have any comment, let us know. There'll be links to this coverage on the podcast that you're
Absolutely.
hearing, and connect with any one of us or the guest.
yep,
So stay
Definitely.
tuned, and we'll be back
yep, perfect.
to the
Thanks,
future.
Back to
Back to the future.
Uh-huh.
Jumping into the DeLorean.
always, or into the Thames on a stand-up paddleboard.
No, that I'm not gonna do it.
All right, thanks everybody.